information from your American Red Cross.
Good morning and welcome to Red Cross Currents. My name is Billy Ray Bates and I'm a volunteer with the Saginaw County chapter of the American Red Cross. And we're always hearing about how the Red Cross responds to emergencies. If there's a fire, if there's a devastating flood, if a tornado drives people out of their homes, volunteers jump in and help victims put their lives back together. It's easy, though, to think of the Red Cross in national terms, in terms of things that happen far away from us. Once in a while, though, something happens right here in Saginaw that's very real and very devastating and very close to us. In December of 1994, fire destroyed the Shattuck Plaza apartments in Carrollton. It sent 69 people out of their homes. Red Cross volunteers were there. They helped with shelter, clothing, medicine, whatever the victims needed to put their lives back in order. And with me on today's show, we have two members of the Disaster Action Team for the Red Cross, Melissa Pike. Welcome, Melissa. She is Director of Disaster Services for the Red Cross. And Jim Coinas. He is a member of the Disaster Action Team. Welcome, Jim.
Welcome.
Good to have you both here. Now, how many Red Cross volunteers responded to the Shattuck Plaza Apartments fire?
There were about 8 people, Red Cross personnel altogether, working that night. In the next day, we had about 6 people working during the day to assist people with longer-term needs. And then there were also several other people who were involved in the assistance in the weeks following.
Okay. When is the last time that the Red Cross responded to a fire of this magnitude in the Saginaw area?
The last one that I can think of would be the Fordney fire, which had many similarities, with fewer families but more dramatic as far as the media coverage of it.
Okay. How many families did the Red Cross help out with this emergency?
I don't remember altogether. With
there were
the family here in Carrollton?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was thinking you were referring to Fordney fire. There were 41 families in the Carrollton fire.
41 families and 69 individuals were driven from their homes with that fire. Okay. Where did the victims stay?
Many of them chose to stay with family and friends during the first nights after the fire. There were others that were housed at the city rescue mission. It was obvious shortly after the fire started that we were going to be looking at long-term housing versus a few days while apartments were cleaned up. So they were housed mostly through the city rescue mission.
Okay. When something like this happens, when there's a fire that actually destroys a building and Red Cross volunteers go on the scene and help victims out, what is the first thing that they have to provide to the victims, first and foremost?
That might vary according to the time of day. We do want to make sure that their food, clothing, and shelter needs are met. Any immediate medical needs, if they're on medications, that cannot be missed, that type of thing. We want to make sure that they have what they need to sustain life, basically.
Okay. And what other kinds of services does the Red Cross provide in emergencies like this?
In situations like this, we also provided assistance with occupational supplies, there were several that we helped with rent and security deposits, beds and dining room tables and chairs, basic necessary type furnishings, but just the things that they needed to be able to start regrouping with their households.
Okay. Were there any residents of the Shattuck Plaza apartments who were injured in the fire?
There were 2 who were injured. There was one who went to the hospital and was released immediately, and then there was another that had stayed overnight, an expectant mom who had been kept for observation.
Okay. What about Red Cross volunteers? Were any of the volunteers?
We had no injuries. Fortunately, our volunteers tend to be real safety conscious, so it very seldom is anyone injured on the job, and we're proud of that fact.
Okay, great. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the Shattuck Plaza Apartments fire last December. Welcome back to Red Cross Currents. We're talking about the fire that destroyed the Shattuck Plaza Apartments in Carrollton in December of 1994. and how Red Cross volunteers jumped in and helped victims put their lives back in order after that. With me on today's show are Melissa Pike. She is Director of Disaster Services for the American Red Cross, and Jim Coinis. He is a member of the Disaster Action Team who was on the scene that night of the fire. Okay, and we were talking about the Red Cross responding to the Shattuck Plaza fire. How did the fire affect the Red Cross financially?
Well, it had quite a dramatic impact on us as well. It occurred at the end of the year, very obviously, and it occurred at a period where we were already over budget in the area of disaster services. So it was really a situation that kind of threw us a lot of questions. What we did at that point was we contacted our national headquarters and asked for financial assistance from the Disaster Relief Fund, which is a national fund. People may have noticed a number for a 1-800 number. I frequently see commercials, you know, call and help. It came directly from that fund. So we applied for that assistance. In addition, the public just poured out their hearts for these people, and we raised over $7,000 just in individual contributions. There were offices that, rather than exchange Christmas gifts, contributed money to this fund, and just individuals went into their piggy banks and brought in money, and it was really wonderful.
Okay, so the Red Cross did have to call in the national office for additional funds for this emergency.
Yes.
And the public, individual people in the community contributed $7,000, you said?
Yes.
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
A little more than that, yeah, and
okay.
that's, you know, nearly 50% of the cost, and that is really an outstanding figure for any place. And I consider it to be especially outstanding given the current economy. Sometimes people find it a little more difficult to give.
Okay. So how much altogether has the Red Cross spent on this emergency so far?
We're at about $15,000.
Okay. Do you find that the time of the year affected how much was donated, especially from individuals in the community?
Very definitely. There were so many people who called us and who would say, I can't imagine if this happened to me this close to the holidays, so that's why I want to give. What can I do? And I think it really tugged at people's hearts.
Because this was Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What different organizations contributed to this effort?
Oh, there were quite a few all through town. Calls just started pouring in. Carrollton Public Schools were very active in collecting donated items from individuals. The City Rescue Mission, of course, provided the housing for those victims that needed it, and along with that would come meals for those victims housed there. The New Hope Center, Good Neighbors Mission, St. Vincent de Paul, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, too, was very active. St. Joseph's Church in Carrollton did collect items. The Marines Toys for Tots program managed to come up with extra toys for the children that were affected by this. And then the Forwards gas station near the apartment contributed all the coffee we needed the night of the operation, which is another one of those things that we do on scene, is we try to provide coffee, food, whatever for the emergency personnel so that they can concentrate on the fire and maintain a certain energy level and warmth.
Okay. Now, at a time like this, when fire actually destroys housing for people, do you find that motels and hotels donate lodging for victims?
We do have a listing that we maintain within our chapter. It was recently developed, actually, where one of our staff went out to the 2 different hotels and motels and was able to create sort of a bank of hotels that are willing to donate rooms to us. Most of them make a commitment of 1 to 2 room nights per month. We only use that for people who require only short-term housing versus a longer term, which these victims needed. So in this case, we didn't utilize those donated rooms. But hotels have been very generous to us in making that available.
Okay, great. What other emergencies, and not just fires, has the Red Cross responded to in recent years?
Recently, we've had the Shattuck Plaza fire, which was, well, obviously, we've been talking about that. We've also had the summer floods in July of this year, you may recall that. There were approximately, near 80 families that had been affected by that flooding here in Saginaw County. There was also a spring windstorm in '93, the Fordney Hotel fire in '91, the Freeland train derailment in 1990. We'd also, I think it was in April of '92, had an ice storm that hit on April Fool's Day. So we've had quite a few uncommon disasters in the area.
Okay, now in 1986, there was flooding in the area. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how many people were affected in that disaster?
Sure. In that flooding in the state actually affected 30 counties, and there were over 2,000 Red Cross volunteers who were involved in that operation throughout the state. It started in September and lasted through Thanksgiving time. And there, again, was another situation where national dollars were involved. There was a total cost to the Red Cross of over $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Jim, I understand that you were involved with the efforts in 1986 when there was all that flooding, that you were a member of the disaster action team who responded to that. What kinds of services did you have to provide for victims?
Well, basically, at first, I started out as, that was my first response, by the way, to a disaster.
Oh,
I just was new to the program. I started out as a shelter manager, and I was out to the Swan Valley High School, which was kind of unique because they evacuated a nursing home and brought all the residents there. So there was a lot of special needs people in one place, which was kind of unusual. And there was a lot of different things that had to be done as far as their meals and medications and stuff. Other than that, it was pretty much whatever needed to be done. Did mass care, took food out to people, drove around, did damage assessment. Just pretty much do whatever you need to do.
Okay, getting back to the Shattuck Plaza Apartments fire, how many hours did you spend helping out with that emergency as a volunteer?
Boy, I think it was probably pretty close to 25 to 30 hours.
Wow. And how many hours did you see other volunteers around you spending on that?
We were all pretty much doing about the same. We had the same people that responded the first night, came in the next morning and helped open up the service center at the chapter, worked there all day. We got pretty much all the people taken care of right then, but throughout the weeks we had people coming into the office, and I was in the office doing some work in the office, seeing people there too.
Okay. Now, Melissa, does the Red Cross provide programs on fire safety and prevention?
We definitely do. We provide programs to schools, to senior citizen centers, to basically any agency, program, what have you, that is interested in fire safety programs within their particular program. Some of those are requests. People call us saying, we really want to know more about this. And then others happen because we may contact an agency saying, we really want to do this. Will you let us take the time to do it? Haven't had any turn downs on it. As soon as we call, people say that would be fantastic. So it's definitely something that we make a strong effort to do, because we feel the best way that we can help people is to try to get them not to have disasters to start with, so that they're not having to deal with the emotional and financial loss, because we can never put them in exactly the same position they were in before their disaster. So we believe strongly that education is the key to any good disaster program.
Okay, does the Red Cross offer publications on that?
Oh, we have many publications. We have those that are specific to certain types of disaster. There's a particular series we use frequently called Are You Ready For? And then there's fire, flood, hurricane, earthquake, you name it. We've got a brochure in that. We also real strongly push some other pamphlets we have that are joint productions between Red Cross and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that is part of a family protection series. There's an emergency preparedness checklist, and another publication that's a checklist for people with mobility problems. So there are many different things available, as well as coloring books for children. So we make those available to the public at no charge. It's a part of our disaster education program, and we do not and will not charge for any disaster education programs, because we know how beneficial it is to people.
Okay, great. Now getting back to the Disaster Action Team, and you are Director of Disaster Services for the Red Cross. Is the Red Cross always looking for more volunteers for the team?
Yeah, that's a constant need. We tend to have a core of volunteers who are there for years, such as Jim, and then there are always new ones coming onto the team who it just fits, you know, for a year or two as a part of their lives, but it's not a permanent kind of thing for them. But we constantly have that need, and we're constantly, every month we offer training programs for people who are interested in that as well as other disaster work.
Okay. We also have a screen of information listing the requirements for the Disaster Action Team. Can you run down that information for us?
Sure. The volunteers do have to be available for evening and weekend work. There's approximately 30 hours of training involved that they need to be able to commit for. They have to be in reasonably good health, able to stand outside, for instance, and deal with rather long hours and hard folding chairs and such. They need to have the availability to be on call 1 week out of about every 4. And they also need to be able to attend monthly meetings to update their training or review the calendar because we do schedule people in advance for the time. So those are the basics. And they also have to be people who have an interest in helping other people. We take great pride in the fact that although we are a bureaucracy, we have lots of paperwork and documentation to provide, we know we also have to treat clients as victims, or as individuals, as humans, and you need that one-on-one care.
Okay, great. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Jim more about his involvement with the Red Cross's Disaster Action Team. Welcome back to Red Cross Currents. We're talking about the fire at the Shattuck Plaza apartments and the Red Cross volunteers on the Disaster Action Team who helped out in that emergency. And Jim, you are a member of that team, and you were on the scene that night when the fire destroyed the Shattuck Plaza apartments. Now, belonging to this Disaster Action Team, how many years have you been on that team?
Boy, it's been pretty close, I think about 8 years now.
Okay. And are there we just ran down the list of requirements for belonging to the team. Are there physical requirements for belonging to the team also?
Basically, if you can stand the Michigan winters and the Michigan summers, that's about all you need to do. You got to be able to stand the cold, stand the heat. Well,
Okay.
if you can stand Michigan, you're all set.
Yeah, okay. Do you need to know first aid?
Yes, you do have to have first aid and CPR.
Okay. Does it involve travel out of town?
It could possibly. I'm with the National Red Cross Disaster Team, so I do travel out of state on disasters. But you can just volunteer to do local disasters when you always need people for the local stuff, too.
Okay, now, Melissa, I understand that there are 2 different teams, and Jim says that he belongs to both of them. Can you tell us a little bit about the other team that does travel out of town and help people in other communities?
Sure. The official name of that team would be the Disaster Services Human Resources System, or DSHR. That is a team of trained volunteers who have the backing of their local chapters, chapters who are willing to vouch for them, saying, yes, they're dependable, yes, they can serve the Red Cross proudly. And those volunteers are, anytime there is any type of national disaster, a call will go out for people who are specialists, for instance, in family services, which is the casework assistance, or for people who are specialists in mass care or damage assessment, records and reports, training, logistics. Everyone who is part of the system is able to list up to 3 specialties that they have, and those volunteers then, when a large-scale disaster occurs, at the moment we do have a volunteer who's down in Alabama following the tornado that they'd had. But anytime there's a disaster, we tend to get a call from National saying, we need mental health technicians, can you help us? And We call any of our people who qualify, who are already registered in the system, and find out their availability, and then do send them out.
Okay. Now, Jim, with this volunteering job, there's certainly a little bit of risk attached to it. Do you think that that deters people from volunteering?
Not really. I think sometimes that maybe they want to volunteer more. There's a little excitement to their life, and it's, like I said, I've been doing it quite a while, and it's never really been any situation where I felt that I was in any danger.
Okay, what would you say to somebody who would like to become a member of the disaster action team but is not sure about, you know, the risk and the chance of being hurt in a fire? Or
Come on down and try it out. It's the only way you can get to know. What you need to know, the first thing we teach people, even in our first aid classes and CPR classes, is that we don't train you to be a hero. You protect yourself first. If it doesn't seem to be safe, then you don't go there. You stay back and wait for the area to become secure or safe, and then you would proceed in. You don't ever put yourself at risk. You always protect yourself and your family first.
Okay. Why did you first decide to join the disaster action team?
Wanted to help people. Had a need that I wanted to go out and make a difference in somebody's life who just lost everything they've ever had.
Okay. And what benefits do you get out of this volunteering?
Usually a thank you from the people. It makes you feel good when you're able to give people back a little bit of something so they can regain their pride and start over again.
Okay. In working with the fire victims at the Shattuck Plaza apartments, did you find, as you're working with the victims, that it changed the way that they looked at things, maybe the way that they looked at their life, or the way that they looked about fire safety?
I think the biggest thing was that they learned how fast they could lose everything they ever had in their life. One minute it was there, the next minute it wasn't. There was one gentleman sitting in a folding chair fairly close to the fire. I spoke with him and tried to talk him to get back away, and he just wanted to sit there because he was determined that he could go back into the apartment as soon as the fireman put it out. After he realized that wasn't so, then we took care of him, took him to the rescue mission and that, but just how fast your life can change and you can lose everything.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Melissa, as you work with victims of not only this fire but other events like that, do you think that this changes the way people look at their lives? And
I definitely think so. Again, there's always, I can't say that I've ever worked with a fire victim who's ever said, you know, I knew this was going to happen. It was always, I never thought it would be me. And then that frequently gives them cause to start talking about, you know, how do I get renter's insurance? Do you know how much that would cost? And to start looking at what if this were going to happen to them again. So I think it makes real differences. They also kind of start prioritizing. You reach a point where they can say, but that's not important because we're all here, and that's what's important now. So.
Okay. Why did you first get into this line of work, Melissa?
Sometimes I think it was insanity, but it was also, just as Jim said, a need to feel that what I was doing was productive, that it made a difference to people. I am not the kind of person to work for a business to earn money for somebody else's benefit, but that doesn't suit me. I tend to like the caretaking role. And when I can see that I am making a difference for people, you know, helping them when they have very little, then that makes the day very worthwhile. When you know you've helped even one person be that many more steps ahead of where they were earlier in the day, that definitely makes it worthwhile.
Okay, great. Now, after the fact, now that this Shattuck Plaza Apartments fire disaster is over and done with pretty much, I think the aftermath is pretty much done. What do you think the Red Cross could do differently? Is there anything, looking back now, that you would change? Or
there are things about in our chapter response that we've talked about. We did have a critique and did discuss the things that we would do differently. Basically, we felt that our response, our ability to get there quickly, worked very well. But then there were other small things, like we should have, for instance, the second day, we felt we should have provided meals for victims who were at our service center providing help. We did not do that. But just little things like that we've worked into our plan now so that we can make sure all of those needs are attended to, you know, while we're in the nitty-gritty of the rest of the work. We find if we plan it in advance so that someone has a checklist to grab and do, we're much better.
Okay, great. That is about all the time that we have for today's show. Thank you both for being here with us and telling us more about this disaster that the Red Cross responded to so well. We have a screen of phone numbers that people can contact their nearest Red Cross office if you would like more information about joining the disaster action team. The American Red Cross in Bay County is 517-892-1541. In Midland County, 631-3262. In Saginaw, 754-8181. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.